How is everyone doing today? And in this video, we are going to be making a semi-tier list. It's more going to be a discussion on some of these stronger decks in the game in Pokemon Pocket TCG. And I'm going to be going over some of the more highlighter cards when it comes to the decks that I'm going to be talking about, such as talking about, like, you know, building up to a Charizard or building up to a Mewtwo, talking about the decks, the support, all the other decks that counter them, what decks they counter, all that different type of stuff. So we're going to be going over a general consensus of what the meta is looking like, in my honest opinion, when looking at all the battles I've done within the PvP event, within regular PvP, and basically what cards that we are looking at when it comes to what is consistent inside each deck. There's a bunch of different decks in this game, and there's a bunch of different archetypes that are currently getting thrown out, like stall decks, like decks that do passive damage when they're on the bench. There's just a lot of really cool stuff that's currently out right now, and there are some decks that we aren't going to be talking about today that are a deck that people could use but aren't going to be mentioned today, just because I haven't seen almost anybody use them at all. So there's kind of no showcase or no true definition of how strong they can get. But like I said, I am going to be talking about each card, how strong they are, where they place in my honest opinion in the tier list, and what are the more stronger decks. That way you can start looking into these. I do have some videos already playing with some of these decks, like the Articuno / Starmie deck, like the what is the other deck I tried using. I think I haven't made my Charizard video. I'm going to be making that very soon. I have made a Blastoise video. I got to make Charizard, Pikachu. I also got to make hopefully Mewtwo eventually, because I really want to build that card, but haven't pulled a Gardevoir sadly. But let's go ahead and start talking about our first few decks, just to go ahead and get it started. One thing that a lot of people want to know, of course, is what I think about some of the water decks in the game, especially because of how rampant they are in PvP, especially within the event, and also within regular PvP by all means. And when it comes to cards like Starmie EX, Articuno, these cards are absolutely disgusting. Like, these cards are some of the best cards in the game because of, again, the cards that you're looking at inside these decks. Of course, for the most part, when it comes to a lot of these guys' decks, we are going to be looking at some of the supporter cards being spammed across the board, like the Professor's Research, the Pokeball, all that different type of stuff that's in every single type of deck. But what cards that are very exclusive to those specific decks that pull them apart from the rest? And those are going to be, of course, the cards like Misty, which auto gives you a chance to go ahead and give you a energy on your first turn. Has the chance to give you 3 energy on your first turn, all the way up to like 200, which I've seen a screenshot, if it's real, I think it is, but of someone getting like 200 heads in a row, getting 200 energy and stuff like that. Is why Misty is such a busted card. Although there are going to be times where when you pull out your Misty, you're going to get no heads. You're never going to get heads, and you're just going to pull tails for both cards, and you're going to get bricked for the rest of the game. But even more so, the water deck by itself is still really strong, especially because Articuno by itself is able to do an easy 80 damage, being able to hurt the back line. We have Blastoise with his one-shot potential, and we also have Starmie with their potential as well, with a 2 energy cost stage 2 evolution with 130 health and hitting 90. So you're basically one-shotting across the board no matter what, because I don't think for the most part there are that many Pokemon that have more than 180 health. So realistically, looking at a lot of these water decks and looking at having Misty on the team, it just makes these water decks so strong and makes them really good. And it's kind of something that you don't see within a lot of these other decks that we currently have at the moment. There's not that many energy funnelers that are as easy to bring out, such as Misty, and have the, I would say, importance and power that she's able to bring out on a first turn kill, or just outright giving as much energy as possible to one of your main highlighter units. And looking at all these water Pokemon at the current moment, Starmie definitely is going to be one of the stronger ones at the current moment, just because really quick to get on the board, really quick to evolve, has a lot of health, has a lot of damage, only 2 energy, no retreat cost, a lot of really good stuff that comes with that deck. And then Articuno is always the go-to solution for the other set of Pokemon you're going to be bringing within your water deck, whether it's going to be a Blastoise deck, whether it's going to be a Starmie deck, or it's going to be a Gyarados deck. You're going to bring some Articunos along with you, just to have a primary tank, or to have someone as a punching bag, or to even build them out using Blizzard, just smacking them across the back line and also getting a nasty 80 hit as soon as you have the active Pokemon on the field. So realistically, all the water Pokemon right now, just because there is no other Misty for the other elements in the game, those are going to be the S tiers for sure. Another thing I do want to bring out is that yes, there are cards like Moltres that can funnel in as an energy producer just like Misty, and same thing goes for another character like Gardevoir, who's the energy funneler for the psychic type. And then we also have Lilligant, who's also the energy funneler for the grass type. So yes, there are other energy funnelers besides Misty for the other types like Moltres, like Gardevoir, like Lilligant. But realistically, looking at how easy it is to bring these guys out and how early it is to bring them out and get them rolling is the big difference between why the water deck is so good and why all the other decks are below it for the most part. Moltres, although it has the same aspect of Misty, being able to give a certain amount of energy depending on the coins flipped, and you can still get some after rolling tails on your first coin. The problem with Moltres is you can't use it, of course, in the first turn. Because you don't have that energy, you have to wait till the second turn. That's why Misty can kind of be OP. Moltres is really good still, just a little bit underneath Misty. It's just there's so much craziness that goes with the water deck when comparing something like a supporter card like Misty towards a Moltres. Gardevoir and Lilligant are evolutions, so that's why they're lower than Misty. Gardevoir being a stage 3 evolution, and of course a lot of the times you are going to try to highlight them and also target them in the back line just so that you are able to stop characters like Mewtwo, like Gengar from getting all the energy that they want. And this is majority of the time on a Mewtwo deck, of course, because Mewtwo ends up taking away energy when he uses his Psych Drive. So Gardevoir is stage 3, usually targeted very heavily. You can stop them before they get to that point if you just go after their Ralts or their Curlia, and you'll pretty much be set. Lilligant doesn't have too much HP either and is a stage 2, so you can also deal with them very quickly if you start prioritizing them as fast as possible. And like I said, evolution based, you still have to wait a couple of turns before you can funnel in energy. So yes, characters like Moltres and Misty are going to be the premier energy funnelers, but nothing beats having a Misty turn 1 and getting a 1-turn KO. That's just why the water decks are so busted at the current moment. Another deck that I think right now is really great and really strong is going to be Pikachu EX, or the Lightning deck with Pikachu in it, just because it gets really easy to set up, especially like I said with the current meta that we are in Pokemon Pocket TCG. We have Professor Oaks, we have Pokeballs, we have all these search cards or all these thinning cards that are within the game, and seeing cards like having Voltorb and having Pikachu and Zapdos, being able to grab those out with the Pokeball, potentially being able to grab them as well with the Professor Oak. Getting all of these guys can work as your starting lineup, and not only that, when you do eventually get your Pikachu, it's only a 2 cost or 2 energy use for his primary move, which is Circle Circuit, which gets more damage as you build up your backline, which gets done pretty quick. Not only are you giving the 2 energy to Pikachu when he's able to do 90 damage with a full bench, but you're also working on your entire bench. You're evolving Voltorb into Electrode, you're giving Zapdos energy, you're giving your other Pikachu energy, so that way he can go immediately in after your first EX is gone. There's just a bunch of different aspects to the Lightning team that, because he's so low cost and because overall the team itself is a low retreat cost team, you're able to switch them out whenever you need. So when Zapdos is able to go within 1 energy, Pikachu's able to go out within 1 energy, Electrode is absolutely free. The same reason why Starmie is so good. These are why the electric team is so good, or the lightning team is so great. And for right now, these are most likely going to be it when it comes to the top teams right now in Pokemon Pocket TCG, when it comes to the water deck and also the lightning deck. The lightning deck, only reason it's here, even though it doesn't have a necessary energy funneler, is because of how fast it gets set up and how much damage they can start dishing out as quickly as they can. Because Pikachu, Zapdos is basically the main plan and basically what you are building up to play against, and all they really need is energy. They don't necessarily need to evolve, they don't need to worry about anything else. So this is the best possible thing you can look for when it comes to a deck. Very fast to get down, very quick when it comes to damage, and also overall just scales very quickly as long as the battle goes on. You're going to be giving Pikachu more benched units as time goes by. Zapdos is going to be able to use, I think it's called Rolling Thunder if I'm not wrong, which is where they flip the 4 coins and can do potentially 200 damage, will one shot basically any Pokemon in the game, or it will one-shot any Pokemon in the game if you allow it to get all 4 heads. So these are the top decks, or the top Pokemon right now that are going to be in the S tier in my honest opinion. I see these guys the most, and talking about other decks I see the most, Mewtwo is definitely going to be one of them, but I do think is right below them. The only problem I have with Mewtwo is that it takes a lot of time to get Gardevoir up, and especially if you don't end up pulling that Ralts. Of course, we do have the Pokeballs to be able to kind of guarantee it, but not getting Ralts, not getting your Curlia, not getting your Gardevoir in a certain amount of time really, and I mean really, messes up Mewtwo if he doesn't get that evolution done very quickly. And of course, because it is a stage 3 evolution, that is going to have to make it very worrisome when you're looking at how Mewtwo is working, because not only do you have to have 4 energy to basically start getting those one-shots off, if you don't have Gardevoir, that's another 2 turns you have to wait in order to get the full amount of energy that you possibly want. So having to wait for Gardevoir, which is stage 3, Mewtwo discarding 2 energy for his 150 is going to be a little bit of a burden for him. Is he strong? Yes, definitely, because once you get that Gardevoir out, you're basically going to start one-shotting the whole board, spamming Psych Drive, and it's basically over for the other team, especially if they don't have anything crazily built, or they've already taken away your Mewtwo, or you're maybe even building a Mewtwo in the back line as well, the second one. So there's a lot of stuff that goes over Mewtwo, and a lot of stuff that is able to help him out. It's just that sadly his deck right now does take quite some time to build up and get him to where he wants to be. There are certain portions of other decks that can be built up a little bit faster, that can hinder your progress in getting your Gardevoir out there or your Mewtwo fully built, which of course is the main game plan of your deck. So while the other teams, like the ones above it, are able to go immediately into their damage, that are able to just pull out cards that give them an instant win for the most part, like Pikachu and also the Misty portions of the water decks, Mewtwo has to wait a good amount before his game plan gets to put into action. But with the amount of stuff that we have in the game, of course, like the Pokeball, Professor's Research, Gardevoir themselves, it's not too hard for the most part to get the Gardevoir out. It's just that when you don't get it, you pretty much bricked your hand, and it gets really hard for Mewtwo to do his job and start KOing enemies. So by that point, you will be taking quite a bit of damage, and Mewtwo will probably be dead by the time he gets to that 4 energy. So he is going to have to be a little bit lower than these guys, just because these guys get set up way faster and can end up having some crazy potential, especially if Misty rolls well. And then Pikachu is just Pikachu. That deck overall just gets set up so fast and does so much damage immediately that there really isn't any hassle no matter what they pull out of their first starting hand. So Mewtwo will be one below them in my honest opinion. The next one is going to be Charizard, and the same reason why I talked about the energy funnelers with Moltres being underneath them. I do think Moltres for the most part is a really strong energy funneler, just because especially if you get it on your first hand and you get your Charmander very quickly, then you can start funneling as much energy as you possibly want, letting your Moltres be a punching bag for the most part until it's time to get your Charizard to stage 3. And this can work for many other Pokemon as well. There are people that are using Arcanine with this. There are people that are building up their Ninetales like I have sometimes as well. Charizard for the most part I think has the highest damaging move guaranteed, besides Zapdos, which is his Crimson Storm. That is a 200 damage move. It is 4 energy and it does discard 2, but when you have someone like Moltres feeding you energy in the backline non-stop until it's their time to leave the active field, Charizard probably has 7 energy already waiting for him, or at least 6, 5 energy, and that gives them a guaranteed Crimson Storm. Then you put 1 energy back on them, that's another Crimson Storm, and that's gonna one-shot everything in the game without a doubt. There is nothing that can survive that move, even with damage reduction passives that they have on them. So yes, there's a lot of really great stuff that happens with having Charizard and building him up with his energy, and that's the only reason he's up here. If we didn't have Moltres, he definitely would have been underneath Mewtwo, just because of course needing that energy funneler is a pretty big thing, and realistically having a move that one shots regardless is really strong. I really love my Charizard deck. It's just sometimes it's annoying when you don't get your Moltres on early and you're having to use your Charmanders as your active spot and you're really having to just sack one. It really does suck to see when you do lose that out. So while these guys have multiple options to be able to throw out in the active field, or have a lot of good starting hands with either getting an Articuno, getting a Staryu, and then going immediately into Starmie. Same thing goes with the Blastoise. You can really easily just work around, you know, sacking a Squirtle, going into Articuno. He's able to do a massive damage. Pikachu's able to go with anybody that gets thrown onto the field. Voltorb, having Zapdos, having Pikachu, any Pokemon coming into the hand is going to be something really good. While something like Charizard, if you don't get Moltres early, it's kind of a done deal. And same thing goes for Mewtwo. If you don't ever build up your Gardevoir, it's a done deal. So as you can see, as we go lower and lower in the list, there becomes a little bit of problems, whether it is harder to have a better starting hand, harder to have a consistent game plan, or there's just certain aspects of the deck that start to diminish as we go further down the list. The next thing is going to be Venusaur. Out of the last big three, I do think Venusaur is a little bit lower, just because right now there's just so much fire in the list of decks that I see so much often in PvP. A lot of people are tearing through Patil or Lilligant before they get into Venusaur, and that's the thing that sucks for Venusaur. Is the same thing that is why Mewtwo is sadly in a position where he has to wait for Gardevoir. Same thing goes for Venusaur. He has to wait for Lilligant to be able to energy him by the time he's already as Bulbasaur on the bench. So looking at Lilligant, if you're targeting Lilligant, if you're targeting the Bulbasaur with the Sabrina or something like that to be able to start one-shotting them, the plan gets shown off really quickly, in my honest opinion, or they're easier to take out than the Gardevoir, in my honest opinion, for some reason. And especially with how Venusaur does a lot less damage, of course, at the cost of him having more health. If they are using Ericas and spamming stuff like Butterfree, potions, Ericas, his Giant Bloom attack that heals them, then yes, he can start being annoying to deal with. But for the most part, they usually don't have all of those things in their hand to make it absolutely beautiful of that synergy to work out, because that requires a lot. Having the Lilligant basically be evolved to start battering the Venusaur, basically getting the Butterfree to actually come out, which takes quite a bit of time for them to evolve into that stage 3, and then going into the Venusaur, then having the Ericas on hand, having the potions on hand. It's a lot of stuff to worry about when we're looking at the Venusaur and how it works on them. Again, there is the potential for a Charizard to come in and Crimson Storm and you're basically dead. So Venusaur does have to deal with having less damage, which seems to be the name of the game right now, which is how fast can you blitz down a deck versus how much can you sustain it. And right now Venusaur just has to worry about too many things aligning for him to be able to get off his major game plan. And the next one is going to be Gengar. Gengar, for the most part, is a really good card. Very similar to the style Mewtwo is going to use, which Mewtwo is just, I'm going to start one-shotting you or getting close to one-shotting you with his Psych Drive. Gengar is a little bit more of an annoyance deck because, of course, you can't use your supporters if he's in the active spot. So it is going to make it a little bit harder for your opponent to have their deck in line. But realistically, Gengar is just the worst version of Mewtwo. There can be some certain situations where you can annoy people to death and start putting them in situations that they probably don't want to be in to be able to get their game plan going. But realistically, having a Mewtwo and just throwing that in, start doing damage, is way better than having Gengar on the field and having to get into that stage 3 to eventually get off the you can't do anything while I'm on the active spot. And I also do 100 damage, which is nice, like I said, but you might as well just throw in Mewtwo, get in that damage immediately, especially if you have Gardevoir out, because that's basically the game plan that Gengar is going to be playing anyway, for the most part. So yeah, Mewtwo is just going to be a little bit higher, and Gengar is going to be that little annoying card that we have right underneath Mewtwo's deck. The next one is going to be, in my honest opinion, Dragonite. Dragonite is personally a card I don't like as much, just because I feel like it relies a little too much on a lot of different factors. One being, of course, the different energies that you need to put on. Honestly, not the worst thing in the world to have. The only thing that sucks is that with having mixed energy, this stops you from being able to have certain cards in the future. Right now, he can't use Misty to get that water energy off because, of course, he needs to be a water type Pokemon. Same thing goes, we don't have energy funneler for Lightning, so he can't get that easy. So he just has to wait until he ends up passively getting those 4 energy by himself. And For Dragonite, of course, he's a stage 3 evolution like a lot of the bigger hard hitters in the game, but having that mixed energy makes it a lot harder for him to be able to benefit from certain cards. Like I said, can't use Misty, can't use a lightning funneler because we don't have one at the moment. If it was another element like water and fire and you could use Moltres in the deck or something like that, then maybe it would work out and you could like burn all your energy to give it to Dragonite, and that would allow Draco Meteor to come out, of course, because Draco Meteor is a really good move, being able to hit 50 randomly 4 times within all of your active field and your bench. Really good move. But of course, with all that setup, it's going to be really easy for someone to Sabrina out your Dragonair, your Dratini, and just start doing damage and stopping you from getting to that Dragonite, because it takes quite some time for you to build up that 4 energy without any funnelers. Also having to deal with being able to be a stage 3 evolution, which is really hard for you to bring out if you're not prioritizing anybody on your active field. Because if you're not scary on your active field, I might as well Sabrina you out or just immediately KO whoever you have in your active spot and just bring out that Dragonair, bring out that Dratini, even bring out that Dragonite and start doing damage to you immediately before you get all 4 energy, which is pretty much how you deal with Dragonite decks and stop them from doing their grand plan. The next thing I do want to talk about is going to be Marowak's deck. RNG decks, although this can be strong against certain Pokemon or certain decks specifically, I don't like the Marowak deck because it's RNG reliant. Now, of course, doing 160 damage is something that's kind of crazy for 2 energy and a stage 2. That's something that we can all agree with. It's a really strong move, but the amount of times that you can go double tails and just do no damage and then now you lost the match because of it, it's a little too prevalent. It happens a good amount of times to where it kind of ruins the value of the deck or ruins the value of the card. Now, you like RNG, if you think it's really fun, if you think it gives you that thrill of like, oh, I hit double heads, now you're one shot, now I just took out your Pokemon because I got double heads, I got lucky, boom boom, then you know that's really nice. Keep on playing the deck, of course. And of course, no matter where your deck is or your favorite card is in this tier list, it's not realistically to say, oh, you can't use it anymore, you should be using water, you should be using lightning, you probably shouldn't be using Dragonite or something like that. This is just to show what I think their terms of power are. Of course, a Dragonite deck can easily be a water deck, can be a lightning deck if you have the luck, if you have the right hand, or maybe even if you built the deck a little bit better than the other guys, especially with what we might see in the future when it comes to future support from packs that we're going to see later on into the lifespan of this game. So we never know what's going to happen when these end up changing, but this is what it's looking like for now with all the matches I've been doing in Pokemon Pocket TCG. A lot of the other decks that we see at the bottom right here, like having, well, Gardevoir is just an energy funneler for Mewtwo. I was just going to show that off. And a lot of these guys are just supports for the most part. Executor is really part of Venusaur's deck. Melmetal, haven't really seen enough of to be able to say anything about him. For some reason, no one wants to rock metal Pokemon. And I think the reason why is, of course, what I said before with the fire Pokemon. There's just a lot of them in PvP. So it makes running these grass type decks and running these metal decks really annoying because you're able to have those double effectiveness towards those 2 typings, which make it really hard to start their game plan, because of course you have to evolve from the previous versions. And if you have someone like a Charmander and you start using your energy and discarding that energy for Ember, you're basically about to one-shot them. So it really is hard to set up, especially when you're going against a fire deck and you have to worry about something as crazy as Charizard's Crimson Storm, which will one-shot your whole entire roster of Pokemon that is in this game. So yeah, I haven't seen a lot of metal. Raichu, I don't like this card at all. Having to discard all your energy for the 140, although is pretty cool in my honest opinion, because this is basically a one-shot for most Pokemon in the game. Discarding all your energy and losing that economy of energy is kind of bad in my honest opinion, just because I don't like the idea of wasted energy, especially when energy can be put to use for way stronger moves. Energy can be used for very valuable retreats. Having Raichu here using this one-shot move, this is kind of like a last resort thing or something you pull out of nowhere and get that last bit of damage in you need for that last counter. Raichu's pretty cool, but realistically not the playstyle that is preferable. I haven't seen a lot of people run Raichu. Greninja is really cool of a card. I've seen a lot of stall decks. I've seen a lot of backline decks like having Articuno with Greninja, and you're just non-stop hitting the backline with Blizzard and Water Shuriken. You're doing a lot of really cool stuff, and I really like Greninja. Don't know his placement because a lot of people use him as a support rather than a highlighter or MVP card, so I'm gonna just leave him at like an undefined spot. Arcanine, same thing. Haven't seen a lot of people use him either. A lot of people are just really going for Charizard or the Blaine Pokemon, which are like Magmar, Ninetales, and Rapidash. A lot of those cards are a little bit Ninetales is pretty good and Magmar is pretty good, so Blaine's deck can be useful. Of course, it's not gonna be in the same vein as a lot of these other decks up here, because a lot of these decks up here are really hard hitters, have really good support, have really good synergy with their decks at the current moment. I think these are the big boys at the current moment. I think another big boy, in my honest opinion, is Koga's deck with Arbok and having Weezing. That stuff is really cool. Oh, Muck, my bad. Muck and Weezing, these decks are really freaking good, especially when you have cards like Wigglytuff and Weezing, which I made a video on. This deck is nasty. I love this deck a lot. I think it kind of falls into place with some of the B tier decks. Lastly, Machamp, same thing goes. I think Machamp's actually a better version of having the Marowak deck because you do have that consistent damage, and this is a lot of damage for a lot of health. And 3 energy is not too bad for a stage 3 evolution as well. So realistically, I do think Machamp is a little bit better than Marowak just because Machamp has the consistent damage, while Marowak, you have a chance to do 80 sometimes, you can do 160 some other times, and then sometimes you can do 0, which is not the best thing in the world. And of course, Primeape is just the lesser version of this, where you're doing like 100 damage if you're lowering your HP. But lowering your HP, starting from Mankey with that one card that we got from the event, then going into Primeape, you're going into some really low HP territory, especially when this is your main hitter card. And a lot of these cards that you're building up to, even characters like Starmie, can immediately one-shot you. So that is going to be very hard for a lot of players to use Primeape as their main DPS or their main card that they're doing damage with, when you have all these other options with a lot more health or a lot more damage in their kit. Even so much so, someone like Marowak, who is inconsistent with his damage, I do think he has more value than someone like Primeape. So realistically, I do think these are some of the more famous decks, some of the more prevalent decks in PvP. I've seen a lot of assortments of these guys, and Water is just insane right now. Lightning is insane, and everybody else kind of falls into place where I put them. Again, I do think that this is just my personal opinion on what I think right now. There's just not a lot of difference or a lot of variance in decks that we see right now in the PvP event. 1-2 hit 45 wins, and it's just a bunch of sweats and whales that are having every single card. They're basically just using these 2 decks or these 3 decks that you see right here in S and A, which is Water, Lightning, Fire, or Mewtwo. I think for the most part, I see a lot of Water, Lightning, and Mewtwo more than Charizard realistically, but I do think Charizard is absolutely insane. Not enough people are using this deck, but if I do see a deck that's not these 3, is definitely Charizard. So for the most part, that's going to be it for this video when it comes to talking about what the strongest decks are right now in Pokemon Pocket TCG. I do think realistically this makes a good list. This is exactly what I kind of see and kind of expect when looking at my recent matches of all the matches I've been doing inside this game, and it kind of looks like this would be a right amount of power between all of these guys. Not ordered in my honest opinion, they're just put in their spot, of course, with the power of threshold that they have to be able to say these guys have their own little tier, and then there starts to be a little bit of discrepancies, a tier down, more discrepancies, a tier down, and then even more discrepancies, a tier down. So other than that, thank you guys so much for watching all the way to the video. See y'all guys in the next one, and peace.